So we have apologies this evening from Councillor Jennings and Councillor Terry.
Members' interests. Are there any?
We're on. Yes, it's probably a bit tenuous, but the Market Towns, obviously I'm the ward member for Ramsey, but there is an office within the area that I'm chairman of the Conservative Association, which is housed within that office, which is between the Great White and the Mews. So I just think it's very tenuous. I'm not, I would say it's non-pecuniary, but just for clarity.
As a chair, I'm the same. I am part of the same association with an office in the Mews close area.
It's going to be one of those nights. I apologise. Okay. Item 3, response to questions.
So this item was just an update from the previous meeting. There was a couple of questions that have been asked, and there is an answer. Sorry, I'm just trying to jump ahead to the page. I think there was minutes before the previous items. So, no. Yes, minutes. Yes, sorry, the minutes were first. Did you want to?
Yes. Response to questions. Okay. Yes. Apologies. We'll go back slightly. It's my agenda, a bit, obviously. We'll just actually look at the minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes? Yes, do you want to take that? Thank you.
So, in the item responses to questions arising from previous minutes and meetings, there was an answer on the finance performance report, which Councillor Jennings had asked a question. That's noted there, and I'm just awaiting an answer on the other question that was asked in that meeting. So that will obviously stay on that document until we've had an answer on that, and we'll obviously update you as soon as we've got that. But we'll keep that on there so that that's noted. Is there any other questions, Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, on that 24/8, I was under to think that the county HDC was undertaking the weeding on behalf of the county council. Is that correct? And if so, when are they going to start? When's HDC going to start to clear the weeds in the villages? Because we seem to have been left high and dry, and we've got trees now growing in the curb lines, and it's really not a good look for both the district and the county.
I think Mike just wanted to come in on that one.
Having all sorts of technical gremlins tonight, aren't we? Thank you for that, Councillor Gardner. I know my colleague Oliver Morley's been liaising on this particular issue with the County Council and is in the discussions on it, so I'll make sure that Oliver gives you a response on that directly in the next couple of days.
Okay, item 4, actually, and now it's overview and scrutiny work programme.
So the overview and scrutiny work programme was in the pack. Obviously, as we spoke last time, we have got the training booked in for September for this panel, and the work programme will help to be developed from that training. But in the meantime, obviously, we have the items that are coming up in September on that document. Were there any other questions on that anybody had? I was going to say it's not changed that much from the last time because of the time of year and obviously the events that have been going on the last month. But if there's any questions, or if not, we can always pick those up outside and put them on the agenda for next time.
Okay, item 5, which is Market Towns update.
There we go. Good evening, colleagues. Hopefully you can hear me. This is another quarterly update on the Market Towns programme. It has been suggested to me that there may be reasons why some people might not be looking forward to hearing me present at quite the length you normally would about Market Towns this evening. Of course, this is a regular report that you have opportunity to discuss quarterly. We run much more regular drop-in sessions for those of you who are ward members in St Neots around the ongoing projects there. We'll certainly be doing the same as projects in, for example, Ramsey move towards the delivery phase as well. Colleagues have plenty of opportunity to discuss elements here, so I hope it's not a democratic affront if I don't run through the report point by point for you in advance, because you will have read it, albeit we've got the paper challenges now, so we can revisit that if you wish. All I was going to flag is we always have a deliberate mistake. This month's is the difference between the recommendations on the cover paper and the actual report. The cover paper merely invites you to comment on the report, and the recommendation in the report is in fact twofold that I will touch on. So the specific decisions we're asking Cabinet to take and inviting your comment on are to support the extension of the shopfront grant scheme district-wide. Colleagues will recall this was funding specifically earmarked for Market Towns, but we've managed to persuade the Combined Authority that we have done enough in that regard and given a good enough go to Market Towns that it's appropriate for us to loosen the geographic restrictions around the funding. And of course our Market Towns are complemented by our surrounding rural areas, as some might remind us. So we're looking for your endorsement on that. We have already announced an intention there in order to maximise notice for businesses to put in applications in funding deadlines. That was because we weren't anticipating disagreement in light of previous discussions about that, but we're looking for your support formally. And we're also seeking a formal delegated authority to move money around more flexibly within the Market Towns programme's budgets as we get to the point of no longer needing elements in contingencies as risks are ruled out from having arisen and so on, and as decisions may need to be made later this financial year, so we've got maximum flexibility. So those are the two key recommendations. Otherwise, the report runs through the various major areas, which, as I say, I won't unpick beyond saying broadly in St Neots things are going well. As I discussed, however, while Christmas will still arrive on time, unfortunately, our ambition to beat our own timescales and be early with respect to the Market Square has been stymied ever so slightly by what we found underneath it. So that's still on time, but it's no longer going to be early. So it'll be 2/3 of the square clear by Christmas events, but the Town Council are well aware of that and are making plans to ensure a full programme of festive activities, just not in quite the way they would if the square was empty. And I will stop, and we're happy to take questions on all or anything, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yes, I read the report, and it was a bit unfortunate about the pipe under the on the ground. So, Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, but it's up to you whether I deliver them all at once or whether you want to come back to me. But I'll start with the first one. So I noticed that in terms of the shopfront grant scheme, only 3 out of 17 applications have been approved in St Neots. So I was just wondering if you could outline, even in general terms, what's the reason why so many have been rejected, or I think there's quite a number still in review. Does that mean they're still potentially successful, or yeah, could you just give a bit of explanation around the situation with the grant scheme in St Neots? That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. So we've discussed this in a little more detail with local St Neots members. It's certainly natural to query that from the numbers in the table. Essentially, we had a larger number of applications that didn't meet the basic criteria in terms of the requirements of submitting bids as opposed to the detail of what was proposed. So bids that were objectively just not capable of being supported. But there are still absolutely bids that are remaining to be reviewed in St Neots as of the snapshot table that we've included here, and we're not expecting a significantly different outcome in St Neots as in other market towns on average in terms of the total awards.
Are there any other colleague, or Councillor Cawley?
Hello, there we go, we're on. I just wanted a query about the Cromwell Museum. As I read this, I just want to understand it better. So we're putting up some money to help the town council potentially buy another property, as I read this, or have I got that completely wrong? And if we are, then do we still have an interest in that property when it's purchased, or does it revert to the Huntingdon Town Council as an asset?
Thank you. So you are reading correctly. This is about supporting the museum to expand so that it's in a position to be competitive for bids to then kit out. We certainly don't have, as we've talked about previously, we don't have the resource in the programme, and nor would we focus it in quite that way to actually then fit out the museum entirely, but without even physical space, and then given the nature of the property market, acquiring physical space is uncertain if they haven't got it. So as things stand, they're not in a strong position to seek bids. As for the intended legal ownership, I think Pam was motioning to come in ahead of me.
Hey, there we go. Sorry. So just to add to what Councillor Wakeford has said, yes, the intention is that the combined authority funding would be used to acquire the building on behalf of the town council. So they would have the ongoing sort of responsibility for the building if that was to come through following the due diligence that we're currently undertaking, just to support that acquisition, to make sure that that wouldn't be an onerous acquisition for the town council to make to support the activities of the Cromwell Museum in the town centre. So will the museum own the asset at the end of the day? It'd be the town council.
Councillor Wells. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. My other 2 questions are actually both about the Priory Centre, so maybe I'll ask both those together if that's all right. There's a statement in the report that we hope to shorten the duration of building works on the Priory Centre after the contract's been awarded. I'm just wondering what leads us to believe that we might be able to do that, and is there any danger that the opposite could happen, that actually the works end up being longer than anticipated? And my second question about the Priory Centre, forgive me because I haven't got the papers in front of me, and I only sort of wrote notes in my question, but I think there was a report. I think we've engaged some consultants to look at the sort of future energy usage and the future energy supply for the Priory Centre, and I'm just wondering if the results of that report are expected to be delivered in time that we might be able to incorporate any necessary changes into the Priory Centre plans. I appreciate that we're not going to be able to, do the kind of electric heating, but if the report recommends, for example, that in future we need certain changes to the building to, just to prepare ourselves, I'm just wondering whether that report will come in time to, incorporate any changes into the building programme.
Thank you. So in reverse order, because you're going to need to remind me the topic of the first question, which will come back to me when you say it, I'm quite sure. The energy feasibility study, it might, we're expecting it to come back this summer, but we are looking at a broader scope than the Priory Centre itself and the redevelopment there. So we're exploring the feasibility of something that would be potentially jointly across that site, for those who know it, across the pedestrianised area, so the Priory Centre, the Oast House, potentially the County Library as well, which are all in extremely close proximity. And the given the associated timelines with taking work forward with respect to those, we're not imagining that's within the scope of specifically redeveloping the Priory Centre, but it's about ensuring that we've got clarity as to options when we need them on the energy source for the site, because as the report discusses, it has become apparent that in fact the pretty new gas boiler in there is working well and can be worked around, and the value of scrapping it from an environmental perspective is not there, and of course that helps us maximise the structural improvements we can make to the building at this point, while of course building a plan for what comes next in terms of energy for the entire site. So to recap, yes, it may be before work starts, but no, it probably won't actually impact it, because it's about a broader project to follow. And the topic of your first question, Councillor.
It was just around I think there was a statement that there was a belief that the duration of building works might be shortened after the contract was awarded.
Thank you. So Pam is more au fait than me in terms of the details of the tendering processes we follow, but fundamentally there is a reasonable expectation of a timescale based on sort of industry standard assumptions, which is what we've made in what we're going out to tender. However, as we found working closely with the contractor on the Market Square, that once you do have a particular contractor in post and you start looking at additional efficiencies that they can make that you can't necessarily assume, but in terms of scheduling, it does tend to be at least plausible that we can make additional shortening. We aren't certain about that, but we're certainly going to do our best to, given the assumptions entailed in the standard period that we've calculated for tendering, forgive me for the works, we don't anticipate there being the opposite risk that you describe of it turning out to be even longer, partly because that's what contractors would be bidding to meet within.
Pam, did you have something further to add, or is that fine? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Going back to the Cromwell Museum and the purchase of this particular building, am I correct then to believe that if further down the line the town council decides to sell because they can't, for whatever reason, continue with that particular property, then the district council or the mayor would not receive any monies coming back from the sale of that particular property, which I would have thought should not be the case. Surely, if the property is sold further down the line, whether it be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, or 50 years' time, the district council should be receiving monies back. That's the only, to me, that's what I want clarification on, is whether if the property is ever sold, then this council would get any monies back plus interest You know, that was my first question.
Okay, thank you for giving me them one at a time, lest I forget that one as well. Now, as a Huntingdon councillor, albeit not a member of Huntingdon Town Council itself, I'm pleased to reassure you that this is there is no intention of supplying funding to expand the museum for the town council to then flog the building as well and profit from that itself. In terms of the mechanics, clearly it would be built into grant funding agreements, and we'd look at whether anything needed to be built into the other legalities of purchase as well. But fundamentally, the purpose of the grant is going to be contractualised. Whether it would money would come back to us with interest, as Councillor Gardner suggests, possibly tongue in cheek. I think part of the point to recall there is where the funding came from in the first place, and it's not simply HDC money that we're choosing to hand. It's grant funding that we've secured from the combined authority. But I think the point stands, and yes, we are delivering the programme for the intended benefit, not for a party to profit without the benefit being delivered.
Thank you. Councillor Catmer.
Well, just to be really clear, it's not pushing us out. It's within tolerance that we'd built into the plan. We'd merely been upfront that we hoped, should we not need all the tolerance that we were building in, and that we could be extra early by 2 months, that we might have had opportunity to deliver something that we were never expecting to, in terms of a clear market square by the November light switch on. We've done quite a lot of work at the north end of the square. It is there across the square. It's not there in a neat line either, so it's inconvenient from various points of view, and it has necessitated working around it, both with manual rather than mechanical digging, and it's prevented use of hydraulics as well to drill down. There remains potential for finding other things across the market square, but we've got through a significant proportion of it already. We are comfortable that we've built in enough tolerance that we could manage that as well. Pam is motioning to add.
Just to add on what Councillor Wakeford has said, that a lot of the sort of interrogation into the ground has actually taken place now. So I think we have probably found everything that we're likely to find, and I think we've apart from the pipe, I think we've done pretty well. Obviously, we've had to work on the principle that because no one would own up to owning the pipe, that it is a live facility. So, as Councillor Wakeford has said, that we obviously have to work around, but things like the urban drainage system has now been installed. We've had some tweaks to some of the pits in relation to the water gardens, but that's sort of been quite minimal, sort of like a 600 mil difference. So I think from that purpose, I think we're sort of reasonably confident that the sort of the investigative work has actually uncovered everything that we're likely to uncover. What we have been able to do, though, is whilst that was sort of giving us a sort of a temporary headache, we've been able to progress on other areas of the project in the town centre, so that we're able to free up the sort of the junctions and the high street and the bridge in time for the Christmas event. So although the square won't be fully available, the sort of access to the town centre should be quite free flowing, which will sort of support the level of crowds expected for that type of event.
Thank you. Councillor Motion?
Thank you very much, Chair. I have two questions, one to St Neots and one to Ramsey, so I'm happy to take them separately. So the one to St Neots is, again, about the Priory Centre. And in the report, it talks about the planning application that's currently live with some negative feedback that we've had on it, which happens. We can all understand that. Where are we currently? Where do you see the risk at the moment of if the application fails? Where does this project sit? Do we have enough time? Do we have enough buffer in that timeline to push it back, say 3 months, to get a new application in? Or if it fails this time round, are we then in a situation where we have to renegotiate everything, including the Eaton Centre, including the closure of the Priory Centre as well? It's just be useful to find out where we are in that scheme of things.
Yeah, so Councillor Martin described it as unfortunate, I think, but inevitable that we had objections. I guess there's a different way of putting that, which is that it's jolly reassuring because given the significance of the building work, if we had no objections, I think that would look suspicious and undermine public confidence in the, of course, independent planning process because, it is a historic area and it is entirely expected that we have had some, particularly around conservation. So it is a question of working through those. We're working collaboratively with relevant teams. I think we are confident that we can find an adjustment that is capable of securing permission, but there is iterative discussion ongoing around changes to the design to enable that. I came here this evening from a meeting of the building development group that we've got with the town council, especially, and certain other members, including Councillor Jennings from district perspective, discussing exactly these points. So Pam's free to add, but we are confident we can find an application that we can then proceed with. But as for how much further adjustment is required is going to emerge from discussions over the coming weeks.
And just to add to that, just to say that obviously we've always known that 80% of the works were internal only, so that's always been our sort of our fallback position. That said, obviously we want to bring forward a much more vibrant visual impact to that part of the town as well. So obviously that's part of the work that we're trying to do with our colleagues in planning. One of the things that we have done, because some of the comments have been from conservation and from heritage side of things, is to actually use the consultant that we've got working on the Old Falcon planning application to do some work for us in relation to the Priory, and they are already engaging with our conservation team and also English Heritage to sort of see how we can understand and meet sort of a mutual position in relation to the conservation area and the concerns that they have. So that is all happening. Obviously, there was an expectation that we aimed for a sort of July planning date. I think we've been pragmatic that that's now not going to happen, and I think we are heading towards a September date. So that does put us back some time, but we are twin tracking the activity in relation to the procurement so that sort of delay is minimal. But obviously, we are still aiming to get to an officer recommendation in ideal world. So we'll continue to work with the planning authority to aim to get that as soon as possible.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that answer. Very reassuring. So just moving on to Ramsey now. Obviously, there's quite a lot in this paper about Ramsey, which is really good to see. In general, it looks really good. I spent quite a lot of time in Ramsey, and I know that area very well. And it looks like it could be a big improvement for the area. I know Muse Close car park definitely needs redoing one way or the other. But seeing the additional improvements in the town is fantastic, because when I walk around Ramsey any afternoon, it is packed. Trying to get a seat in the sandwich shops or the local coffee shops is nigh on impossible at times. So the investment that we're going to be putting in there is fantastic. My big concern with the pop-up shops, And I'm sure this is just going to be about how they're designed, the size, the scale, just the physical design of them is trying to prevent blocking the shops that are behind. So when people are driving down the high streets, that are still able to see at least a glimpse of the architecture that's there. You know, the town council building is a beautiful building that we should be showing off. But also there are some small independent shops there, some takeaway restaurants as well. And I just want to make sure that we're not completely blocking the view of those shops off, because then that could have a severe impact in their trade. And we don't want to cause that conflict. So if there's anything that we can do to make sure that the way that they are situated, and I know you've done a lot of work on that already, but just working with, I guess, the town councillors and the district councillors for the area, as well as people that use the area on a regular basis, just try and make sure they're positioned in the prime location, you know, maybe have them open at both ends so people can still see through the shops, so they can still see what's the other side. I'm sure you've got this all in hand. It's just important. I just want to make sure that that is something that comes up when you do decide what the final design is. Because the last thing we want are shops closing down or becoming envious of the pocket shops that are right on the front of the road, and they're losing trade as a result. You know, we really don't want to be getting into that situation.
Absolutely. And given the stage we're at in the project, I certainly wouldn't say we've got it under control and resolved it already, but I think that is absolutely, hopefully it reassures Councillor Martin, that's not the first time we've heard a similar point, and that is absolutely one of the areas that we are looking forward to unpacking in greater detail with the sort of small and bigger C consultation that's planned over the coming months, and the work we're doing with the town council, because there will always be there'll be an optimum balance to strike, and finding that, and in the different which feeds into the different ways we might use the shops in a box. Is part of that judgment. So no, it's a very good point, and I'd encourage him, particularly if he has reason to be in Ramsey frequently, to help encourage participation from shop owners locally as well in the consultations that take place.
And just to add to that, we have, I think as of Monday this week, we have employed some sort of retail sort of champions that are actually starting to work with some of the existing businesses, because we recognise that ultimately exactly what you've just said, that we don't want to encourage new business at the detriment of the existing offer in Ramsey Town Centre. So we are working with them to sort of see if there's things that we can actually do from an advisory perspective, you know, into supporting those businesses alongside the wider project. So they're sort of going hand in hand.
Thank you, Pam. Councillor Corney, did you have no? Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to smarter towns, I just wondered if you could give me some more detail with regard to the sensors that have been deployed for flooding on the River Great Ouse, whereabouts they are, and in which market towns.
So I'm quite sure we can discuss details of sensor locations with Councillor Gardner, but Pam and I were looking at each other. Neither of us have that detailed information immediately to hand. So I think we'll need to come back on that one, if that's okay.
Councillor Cartner.
I mean, Councillor Katmer is absolutely right to flag the importance of the issue, as he'll know better than me. And I think it's more than just the shops in a box. So that the design choices around what we do physically to the ground as we pedestrianise parts of the Great White, for example. Well, there are lovely cobbles that one can put down that might look lovely, but quite the opposite if you're trying to move it. From all sorts of perspectives, including with wheeled vehicles, including wheelchairs, including pushchairs, and what have you. So absolutely, we have in mind accessibility concerns across that project, as we have in St Neots as well, where we've taken opportunity to level out parts of paving that we're working on as well. So no, accessibility is at the forefront of our mind with different elements of the Market Towns programme.
Oh, thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. Pam, that's lovely. Thank you very much. We're on to item 6, Huntingdon Police Strategy.
Good evening. Well done for battling through the various technical challenges that we've thrown at you all tonight. But I'm very pleased that we've got the presentation on screen. So Huntingdonshire Futures, you'll know that we've been on this journey. I'll just remind you, you know that this is a facilitated vision for the next 20 to 30 years. It's not ours, it belongs to everybody who took part, all the residents, all the businesses, our children and young people, our older residents. Because we're one of the first in the country to do a place strategy, we are still evolving and innovating that work. That was always part of the vision, but when I think it was first envisaged, the idea was it was going to be in a sort of do a project on vein. You'll know that we're in that do, enable and influence space as an organisation. This needs to be very much in that enable and influence part rather than us doing all of the doing. So I think what you'll hear this evening is a reflection on where we've been as well as a bit of where we're going. You'll see that we're transitioning from where we started and we're moving into something different. It's evolving all of the time. So I'm not going to spoil Neil's thunder. I'm going to let Neil present you with the 6-month update, and then we're happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Councillor Conboy, and good evening, panel. Firstly, can I say thank you for the opportunity for us to present this is the second 6-month update to the panel. And obviously, we were in front of the panel in April, going through Huntingdonshire Futures. So with the permission of the chair, we've actually tacked on an update on the grants awarded to the presentation that was previously published. So, so you can see what has been achieved and where those awards are made. I also need to give apologies for Lily Simonite. So Lily, who you've met, who's presented to the panel, is actually on leave this week, so she's not here presenting, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me. Next slide, please. So that looks like quite a big agenda. So we're going to run through, and it's literally a journey. The first bit is a bit of a refresh just to make sure everybody can remember what we're here for, and then talking through the progress journey by journey, those that we've started and those that we have yet to start, the lessons learned that we've adapted to as we've gone on, and then just the goals for 2024, which I'll just add a little bit more to the slide. So next slide, please. So just by way of background, Futures is a long-term vision. It's, as Councillor Conboy says, it's not just ours. It was co-created. However, we are the custodians of place. And I think what's interesting is that as we work more with people, they are looking for us to take a leadership role in this rather than just an enabling role. And you'll see that reflected in some of our journey so far. 5 elements, which are self-explanatory, but I will add a little bit to that as we go through the slides. So that's the framework with which we're operating on. Next slide, please. So just to set it into context, Huntingdonshire Futures does sit outside HDC as we see it. It's something which everyone is using as a guiding light for Huntingdonshire. So whether it's the businesses that we work with, community voluntary sector, the other organisations that provide public services, it's very much the ambition for Huntingdonshire that we'd like them all to subscribe to, and actually they subscribed to when we created the strategy. So we have to keep reminding them that they were part of this process, and this is a joint endeavour. And then on the right-hand side, we've got our corporate plan. And our corporate plan is in part a response to delivering Huntingdonshire Futures. And that is very much focused on delivering better outcomes for our residents. And it's focused both around the quality of life for people, but also reflecting our place. And so that's how it's split into those 2 sections. And it would also be very wrong of us not to include doing our core work well. Over 80% of what we do is really important, and we rely on officers to do it every day to a good standard, and you receive performance reports about that information and how we do that. If we don't do that well, we don't get the opportunity to pursue some of these other endeavours and better outcomes for our residents, so it's just important to reflect on that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the approach, the ambition to start off with was just to engage with the partners that co-created the strategy to work out how best to implement it. And that was our endeavour. And hopefully, I think you'll feel that we've taken a step beyond that. And we're now looking at how we can formalise that even more and push on a bit harder. So the approach was to work differently, so very much not the district council leading everything, but very much listening to people, engaging them and involving them in the solutions. As Councillor Comboy's already said, whilst places do have strategies, there's not many that have actually converted the strategy into doing. It's challenging work and there's not many models out there. And the consultants that we worked with to develop the strategy, Prior and Partners, have actually been speaking to people about that challenge and are talking to other people around how that evolves. We wanted to do a staged approach because if we went big bang on something new, we might get it wrong and fall flat on our face, putting it bluntly. So therefore, it was important for us to try, evolve and adapt. So you'll see how we've done that. We started off with consultants helping us to develop the strategy and specific consultants helping us with the engagement, supporting the council. We've been in a process of moving away from using consultants to develop this. And so Lily, who was recruited, is part of our team to help coordinate and support the external chairs in terms of how those groups on the different journeys move forward. And it's very participative. And one of the conversations that Councillor Comboy and I often have around this is that we talk about a do, enable and influence model for the council, but actually for this one, it's almost the reverse. Do should be the last choice, and we've got to try and make the difficult choice of getting everybody else to involve up front. And so we try and keep replaying that to ourselves because it's very easy to dive in and think we've got the solution sometimes. The other thing as well is it is a strategy that we had. It had some evidence, but what's very evident as we've moved forward with people is that they want to really understand the data underneath things, what direction things are travelling in, what that contextual basis is. Members have received a presentation about the contextual measures that the council has developed. Well, we're actually moving to using those contextual measures for the journeys because that then gives us a chance to measure progress over that longer period of time. So we've started looking at that for all the journeys too. Next slide, please. So in terms of milestones, we adopted it back in March 2023, and there was about 12 to 18 months worth of work to actually get it to that point of adoption. And early on, we launched with 2 journeys, inclusive economy and health embedded, primarily because we felt they were the tough ones, but also the ones that would contribute most to people's outcomes in Huntingdonshire. As we moved forward into November, we recognised that with the resources that we had, we wouldn't be able to support the programme. So we then recruited a coordinator to help drive it forward. And then you'll remember at the back end of last year, we talked about the Festival of Huntingdonshire and the grants programme and co-creating that. So for a period of 3 months, sort of from December through to February, we held a number of workshops, held a number of online sessions, created that grants programme, and we've launched that, and that's in progress. So there's an update later. For spring so far this year, we've launched environmental innovation. We actually launched it in June, and we did a slightly different approach for that, which we'll talk you through, and also the grants. And then as we head forward into the summer, we'll be concluding those and moving on to the other journeys and starting those up. Next slide, please. So yeah, looking forward, get the grants delivered, but more importantly, look at the benefits. Look at what that's enabled, be able to play that back and see whether it was a worthwhile endeavour or not. It's great giving grants out, but I'm sure you will be as interested as me to see what difference it's made and whether that was worthwhile or not. So it's just as important to evaluate it and reflect on it as it is to issue the grants in the first place. We need to establish a steering group for environmental innovation. We've started the journey, so then we just need to formalise it. And then we're working on structured project management and governance at the moment so that we can make sure that we've got a much more structured way of managing the process. Next slide, please. So on to the journeys now in terms of giving you an overview. So inclusive economy, we started back in July. We established a permanent chair, had an interim chair to start off with, and then they very willingly stepped in to be the permanent chair. So that's the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce for Cambridgeshire, Charlotte Horowin. And we've got a group of people actively engaged working on that. We've had 45 hours worth of input from them, which is not insignificant. They're volunteering their time. And we've got a number of important organisations involved, including the County Council and obviously the Combined Authority as well. So we've done quite a lot of work with them on evidence-based and contextual measures. They've now moved on to 3 areas of priority. They've asked us to do a little bit more in-depth research on those 3 areas. And then we'll be looking at collaborative exercises, bringing people together to look at what the barriers are in those areas and then the solutions moving forward. But very much they are operating as a commissioning group. And now they've got those 3 priority areas, which are actually opportunities for those that are with a disability. So making sure they've got accessibility to work. Looking at women returning to work and entering the workforce, and then also young people, an opportunity which relates to the skills agenda. And so looking at those 3 things, then looking at some of the barriers and opportunities to move forward in those spaces. So very positive, and they're commissioning. We can now invite members with specific interest to join the group relating to those 3 priorities, which is what we're discussing as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of health embedded, started at the same time, very quickly came to some priorities. But the Northwest Federation had troubles. And so the members that joined, we actually basically it fragmented again. And people weren't able to give time. So one of the things that we've done is a bit of a reset, and Oliver Morley has taken over as the technical lead and is now combining the work with the community health and well-being work that we're doing, and that approach to deliberative democracy and getting people involved in that process. It's a different approach for that one, but it recognises that most of the people in health are very hard pressed for time, very busy, and getting them along to some of the meetings is especially challenging. So it's better to have a more focused, driven piece of work. So that's where that is. Next slide, please. In terms of environmental innovation, we reflected on the two journeys. And one of the issues was people were talking about priorities and almost wanted to rewrite a strategy. Well, we've got a place strategy, and everybody spent a lot of time on that. So we actually did a collaborative exercise. We had representatives of 46 different organisations at Burgess Hall, and we looked at the priorities that came out of the place strategy. We looked at them ranking things. We looked at them looking at what was already happening that was really good in Huntingdonshire. And then all of that information now is just being finalised so that we can then have a set of priorities and deliverables that we can then invite a steering group to take on, rather than getting a small group of stakeholders first to say, well, you decide, because they didn't feel comfortable. We had a very good event, very well attended, and we'll get a steering group set up. Probably be September just because of the summer break, but that gives us a chance to invite everybody and give that time to do. So we'll be looking at that steering group from September. Next slide. So Travel Transformed, a slightly different one here. There are transport authorities that are not us, and they have already decided what those priorities are and reflect on them. And I think members will recall that we often want to make representation to their consultations, and they've come to scrutiny meetings. And it's really important that we can put forward what the priorities are in Huntingdonshire actually are in terms of that and some of the challenges. So one of the things we're going to do is link directly to our UK SPF work. We're doing some work on active travel. And as part of that, we're actually going to do an engagement exercise to invite our residents to flag what their top issues are to do with active travel, the things that they'd like to see, so that we're setting our own priorities and we can use those to influence some of the documents that already exist and some of the models that exist to do with active travel. So they recognise some of the rural challenges that we have that perhaps aren't picked up in some of the more structured approaches to active travel that exist at the moment. So we will pick that work up. That's a project that's going to conclude at the end of March next year, and so there'll be a consultation exercise then, and then we'll see what else we can use that Travel Transformed group for. Next slide, please. And then finally, Pride in Place. The grants programme is very focused around Pride in Place, and you'll see that with the evidence. So what we did is we put that on pause just so that we could get environmental innovation up and running, and also make sure that active travel piece of work is done well. That has to be concluded, as I said, by March, so it's really important we're laser focused on getting that done. We got a lot of really good feedback from the collaboration around the Festival of Hunts, the fact that there's a lot of really good things happening in Huntingdonshire. We don't necessarily need to do more, but we need to celebrate what we've got, connect it together, and let people know that it's all there, because our communities are very active and have lots and lots of really good things to be proud of. So with that in mind, some of that has been passed over to economic development as well, who are in the process of looking at their economic development strategy and also what we do in terms of tourism and promoting the district, so that we can embed that in that work. Next slide, please. So in terms of the grants, it's just a recap really. The purpose was to enable community action, to bring futures to life really, and encourage people to do things that were sympathetic to the journeys, whether that was encouraging healthy activity or whether that was celebrating place. And so we had a member workshop, we had town and parish councils, we had voluntary groups involved as well. That then ended up with our proposal that was approved. And we announced it on Huntingdonshire Day, and it was launched successfully on May the 15th. Next slide, please. So in terms of the outcomes overall so far for futures, the grants has had lots of contribution, the parish councils, lots of hours of people's time given up to move things forward. We've prioritised the journeys in the steering groups, and we've got over 10 external organisations involved in what we're doing. We've moved to this data-led approach. It's really important that we know what we're trying to achieve and describing the outcomes. So the journeys will use those contextual measures and look at the levers and the things that they are setting out to change. And they want to articulate that in a problem statement so that they're very clear, we're going to do this because of this, and that will be articulated clearly against each journey. We're modelling that first with inclusive economy. Next slide, please. In terms of the lessons learned, the first thing is that we very much thought that we'd create the space for other people to step into to work, and we'd support them to do that. And I think the evidence was that people wanted a bit more guidance and a bit more of a handrail and a bit more direction. And so we've taken a step into that role to be a little bit more directive, constructing the evidence base, allowing people to make decisions. The journeys do need a problem definition and help to prioritise action. The strategy is brilliant and focuses the mind and attention and also looks at what if, but it does need a bit more centering as to what the problems are now that we're going to look at first. So that's very much the work that's being done with each journey now. And then the other thing really to recognise is that it will be responsive. Things happen. You know, we weren't expecting those things that happened in health. We weren't expecting to lose what was a very cohesive and very connected group that had set some priorities and goals. And we've had to adapt our approach differently because circumstances have changed. And that will continue. And no doubt we'll update you on other things that have impacted as delivery goes on. Next slide, please. That's just an overview of where the journeys are at now. So looking at towards the end of the year, we'll have everything underway and a proposal for Pride of Place. And we'll be wrapping all that up into a more detailed project and programme plan, which will come back to you in due course as soon as that's finished. And that's in the process of being looked at now. Next slide, please. So in terms of 2024, it's very much about getting all the journeys going and moving. It's about supporting those steering groups, making sure that they can get those problem statements and that evidence base. They then feel empowered to make decisions because they're looking at the evidence, feeling confident that they're addressing something that really exists. We're then concluding the grants, obviously, and looking at how that has positively impacted things. And then just revisiting the ambitions of what we want to do and looking at the approach across the piece as we feel that the profile needs to be raised, both internally inside the council, the things that we're doing that contribute to this already, but also external to the council. So we need to plan that work as well. Next slide, please. So we will continue our engagement with you, and whenever there are opportunities to, we would really like to invite you to do that. Any feedback from the celebrations of hunts or any projects that you're aware of that have happened, you know, we'll be, you know, really keen to hear from you as well as from the groups themselves. The environmental innovation was a very different approach. As I said, we had 46 different organisations, and we had councillors in the room as well, helping to contribute that towards that, and we will continue that process. And as soon as more opportunities arise with the journeys, we will let you know and keep you informed. Next slide, please. So this is the first of two slides, which is the addition, and this gives you a flavour of the grant scheme. And this is the latest information of where we're at. So we had a total of £45,000 set aside for grants. You can see so far we've awarded, councillors have awarded nearly £24,000, leaving us with 16,000 left. And there's a breakdown there of the journeys which they've contributed to. So, you know, the lion's share is definitely responsive to Pride in Place. We've had some really good health embedded ideas that have come through, and when we go through, look at some of the detail, there's some really, really good ones that I think members were really pleased to see. And then there's some environmental innovation in there as well. And that map, the arrows on the map just show the spread. So whilst we have got a concentration in Huntingdon and St Ives, I'm really pleased to say that we have got a spread as well in Ramsey, Sawtry, and out to the west there as well, which is something that we wanted to make sure that we achieved through this grant programme, rather than it just being all concentrated in one area. Next slide, please. So there's a detailed list there which will be in your pack, but some of the things just, I guess, to draw attention to, we've had things from a monument that's really part of the community in Worsley, which is the Jubilee Monument, and that's something that will be there forever, and they're looking to make sure that it's there for future generations. We've also got a football club, which is an extension of footballing opportunities for young girls. And then we've also got health and balance classes, which is very much about health embedded in Sawtry. So there's a real mix there of ideas that have come from our communities that the panel have felt able to support. We anticipate one further round possibly that would exhaust the remaining funds. So we're busy preparing for that next one. And obviously we will be publicising that opportunity very shortly, just to make sure that there is that opportunity. So that's the end of my presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Neil. That was very helpful. Are there any questions from Councillor Gardner? Sorry.
Just to quickly jump in before Councillor Gardner asks his question, just to let you all know the agenda appears to be online again now. If anybody had notes on it, I think you should be able to get into it. So there's good news there.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very pleased to hear that we're now back online. The question is, with regard to active travel, have you been in contact with the County Council with regard to their active travel routes? Because I know I'm getting parochial now, and I do apologise, but there are certain active travel routes that within my division that stop, and then you have to get back onto the main road or whatever, and it's not easy, there's no footpath, so you can't then walk. Have you been in contact with the County Council to see if your programme can assist or look at ways of obtaining money to help to get those active travel routes completed? I am thinking of, in the first instance, is the active travel route that was built adjacent to the A1M. It's lovely. It gets right to the roundabout at Auchenbury, but then you can't then get into the village because you then got to walk on the road, or you've got to cycle on the road. If you're on a horse, which is a bridle way, the horse is then in the road trying to negotiate around HGVs that are turning around a roundabout. So it's that sort of thing that I think we need to try and move forward. So, and then the other final point was with regard to the environmental funding. In that, could a flood group come to you for funding with regard to, I'm just thinking in Auchenbury, they've built a new ponds for water collection to prevent the villages from flooding, but they need to do a bit of more work in, greening them up and things like that. Would that be sort of something that you might be able to consider going forward?
Okay, thank you for your questions. So on the active travel, what you describe is exactly what we need to show are our priorities in Huntingdonshire. And so the piece of work is very much to draw attention to those things, to capture them, and for the district council to formally recognise that those are the issues that we want to make sure that we're shouting about that are important to us. Because there's one thing looking at, say, commuter routes that go into maybe Cambridge or whatever, which is kind of where active travel has come from, to then looking at some of our concerns, which are connected rural communities, those rural communities being able to access local services, the fact that we have people that want to travel differently, etc. So the point that you raise is very well made and heard, and those are exactly the things that we'll be looking for to identify in that consultation that we then feed in. And yes, we are working with the County Council and the Combined Authority officers on our piece of work, because the LC whip exists and is set. That's been adopted. There is an active travel plan for Huntingdonshire. We can't change that, but what we can do is influence the future. And so this is our opportunity to not only work to deliver some of the things that have been identified, but also to identify those priorities that we would like looked at in the future. And so then for future funding, we're already in a position, a bit like the EV charging strategy, we've adopted a position, we know where we want to spend money if that opportunity arises. We need to do the same for active travel too. And then with regards to environmental innovation, the grant scheme is a small grant scheme, so it's up to £2,500. But I believe that if you look at the terms of the grants, what you're talking about would fit in within that for consideration with members. But obviously I can't let you know whether the members would agree to it or not.
And the only thing I would say to you is that you've seen that the pot has already been partly spent because we've addressed the grants that have come in and we've been able to say yes to a lot of them. If there are people who are watching this or around this table and when you take the messages back, the answer is it will be a first come, first served, in the sense of, you know, if people want to do this, they need to get those bids in pretty quickly. It's quite a quick process. It's not a particularly onerous process, but once that money is allocated, that fund will then be ended. The wider strategic conversations around with combined authority and with other funding that comes from central government, I kind of think that now is a prime time, and I spent a couple of hours today with the other leaders talking about some of the future work that will be coming through the Combined Authority Board, and there was a lot of discussion around the fact that we have a new administration in government that clearly is going to want to do all sorts of things because it's been very busy announcing all sorts of things in the last 2 days. And the conversation we were having around the room across all of the leaders is we want to be on the front foot for the whole of the Combined Authority. And somewhat selfishly, each of us as leaders on behalf of you as our constituents want to be in the room. You know, I want to be there for Huntingdonshire. I want to be able to say this is what our shopping list looks like. And those schemes need to be ready to go. We need a pipeline coming through that says, you know, these are the ones that we're ready to run with, and these are the ones that we could run with if you can find us some extra money. So, but not all tonight, Ian, because Ian's good. Ian's on it.
Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. Neil, thank you for a very informative presentation. Having looked at the slides, it was better having your voiceover because you brought so much more to the slides. You actually answered my question by your final slide. I wanted to sort of get a bit of detail on who and when. So I was really pleased to see 2 of my villages, so Great Staughton and Perry, were successful in their bids. I've been pushing this because I think it's great, and I know the villages really do appreciate it. Glad to hear what the leaders just said in terms of that conversation that was had. Can I strongly encourage us to find a way to maintain something like this? Because I think it's been well received. I think I've certainly seen it at parish council meetings when we've discussed it, a certain excitement and, oh yeah, we could do this and that might help us with that. So if there's a way that we can future-proof this somehow, I would really welcome that. And I know my villages probably would welcome that. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, thank you for that feedback, and that's exactly the sort of feedback we do want, thank you, because if we know how this works in terms of how well it's received, but also the difference it makes, so it's that impact, what difference did this small pot of money, which to some organisations is a huge amount, what difference did it make? Although we haven't identified a new pot, you know, the answer is there are always opportunities, and you know that we're always on the lookout, and the right thing might appear that we can say, fantastic, we could do another programme very similar, either exactly the same or an iteration again. So please encourage those that have been successful to tell us how it went. But importantly, please keep feeding that feedback around, even if people didn't apply or applied and weren't successful, knowing how that landed is really important to us in terms of what we do next time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Your recommendation asks for input on how members can be involved. Are they able to get involved on the different journeys and steering groups?
So interestingly, to start off with, we thought that we would want to bring our partners out first because we thought that potentially we might end up, we'll be engaging with yourselves anyway through committees, etc. So we want to give them a voice. But when we mixed it up in the environmental innovation, it was hugely successful because we had people that knew their local communities alongside the local communities. So that worked better. So I think in answer to your question is the proof of the pudding's in the eating. We know it works better when we've got everybody together. So that's very much where we'll move forward with. There'll be plenty of opportunity with the health embedded work that Oliver Morley's taking forward. In terms of inclusive economy, we're going to get the steering group with the confidence to then come back to you to then re-involve that way. So we'll steer that back again. So I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a couple of points, so I'll just go through them one by one if that's okay, and if you'll indulge me slightly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what it sounded like from the presentation is that obviously we've got the 5 journeys, but it sounds like 2 of them we're trying to talk to bodies that do not want to be influenced. It doesn't matter what we're going to do. The way it comes across is that they don't want to be influenced as much as what we want to influence. We're coming up against a couple of brick walls. And for me, for this strategy to work, we need all 3 of the do, enable, influence to work for us to achieve what we're looking to do. So at what stage are we going to sit down and say, okay, we still believe in this journey. We still believe that health embedded is a core priority to Huntingdonshire, which it is. But at what stage do we say, okay, well, we're not going to go down the clinical route. We're going to do, like we discussed before this meeting with the new data that's coming out, what we're going to do is say, we're going to do something and take it to them and say, well, we've managed to do this, it's working. What about if we could, again, ask for more funding? You know, at what stage are we going to say that the current journey that we're looking at and the current people we're talking to and trying to influence, let's put them to one side for now and try a different way of achieving the same goal? Because the last thing that I want is for you guys coming back in 6 months' time and say the health board broke down again and you've had to reset it a second time, because then we've just wasted 6 whole months on a journey that's important to our residents when we could be doing something slightly different, trying to get to the same goal but in a slightly different way, realising that we're not going to achieve what we want to achieve in the current setup.
You make a good...
So I'd just like to reflect on the health one, and I haven't been directly part of that journey, so my colleagues here will talk in detail. I think what's really interesting is the world around us is shifting quite fast. So in my day job, I do quite a lot of work with those organisations, the Integrated Care System for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and with NWAFT. I think it would be fair to say that post-COVID, their world should have got a bit easier. That was kind of what we were all expecting. That's what happened in most places. You know, the COVID happened and gradually systems and processes kind of got back on track, a different track, but got back on track. I think it would be fair to say that health of all of our parts of our national system is probably struggling the most, because it isn't only all of the things it dealt with at that period of time and the legacy of that particular pandemic and the things that were with it. There is also now the practical challenge of the wave of need that's coming through the system that either we didn't quite have time to deal with during the pandemic or actually has come since the pandemic. And I'm watching services really, really struggle with the practicalities of there just isn't enough time to do everything that they're having to do. So I don't think you should see that as they don't want to engage. My personal experience, and I'll hand over to Ollie in a moment, my personal experience is people are desperate to engage and are desperately keen to be part of all of this. We have a practical thing around capacity of all the things that are desperately urgent and important. This might not be quite getting to the top of that list because of those other pressures. So it isn't that people don't want to participate. It's not that we've got organisations structurally saying we don't want to be part of this. The timing is just slightly off. She's not entirely our fault, it's not entirely theirs. So again, that's why this is an iterative process. You're right, there might be other things we can do in parallel, and we are certainly always looking at those. But I don't want you to go away from today thinking that our partners don't want to participate in this. And I'll hand to Ollie, but that's certainly been my experience. It's not a lack of will, there just are not enough hours in the day and not quite enough hours in everybody's diaries. But Ollie.
Sorry, could I? Ollie, thank you. Thank you for that. And maybe just to make myself clear, it isn't that people don't want to be engaged with us. It's that they're not willing to be influenced on the other end. So we can go to people and we can have that conversation. We can get everyone around the table and we can say this is what we want to do, but they're going to say no, not happening. That's what I was talking about. It's more that they're not willing to be influenced, not that they're not willing to be around the table.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Martin. And I joined the table partly to say that I think it's a good trailer for an item that's on the agenda at overviewing scrutiny tomorrow, which is our kind of health and wealth building strategy, which we're bringing forward in response. And it's very much brought forward as a set of principles for members to sort of shape and respond to ahead of the full strategy coming forward. And I think that what that does reflect to some extent is what Neil has been saying about how we're looking to embed and mainstream this. It not be another project, but to influence how we sort of work on an enduring basis, I think is one of the points I want to come to the table and say. I think that I really welcome the challenge about our ability to influence partners. And I think Neil, Councillor Comboy and myself really recognise that this is difficult, and that challenge I think is really important. I think one of the things I would say about our partners is I think at times they're slightly overwhelmed by the ambition of this council for what we're trying to achieve. So most other organisations are very good at the do bit. It's our job to make sure that the throughput at a hospital is fast enough and we're getting people back out the door. And when we turn around and say, well, actually, our corporate plan is about improving the outcomes for all our residents. And actually, what's the role of leisure in relation to that? What's the role of our community groups and our warm spaces and Coresco in terms of boosting the social connection, because we know people do better? I think what there has been in a range of the areas, and I think Neil would reflect in terms of the inclusive economy and the environmental innovation, is there's almost an education piece in terms of bringing people up to speed on that. But a couple of the points I'd point to really concrete action is I was sitting down with the Deputy Chief Exec of North West Anglia Foundation Trust last week. We had an hour and a half actively talking about how we make sure the £750 million investment that's going to be taking place in Hinchingbrook over the next 6 years doesn't just deliver us a great hospital, but delivers us a hospital that delivers jobs and employment opportunities for our residents, that works in an integrated way with some of our partners. We've got a meeting tomorrow with the head of estates for the whole ICB, so what was the clinical commissioning group, around what appetite they've got for co-location in our leisure centres and what that would mean in terms of the next phase of investment in those areas. And one of the things that I know Councillor Howell always holds my feet to the flame, and Councillor Harvey as well, is how we address mental health challenges. And again, one of the things in the health and wealth building strategy tomorrow recognises that one of the biggest contributions that we can make is not by dealing with the mental health per se, which is a health matter, but putting the preventative measures in place that stop people's mental health getting bad in the first place. And all the evidence points to three things, that being around economic success, social connection and physical activity. And they're things that we're really mainstreaming in what we do day to day, supported by feedback from health. So only last week, we delivered 8,000 leaflets to residents on the Oxmoor in combination with health. And one of the things that was offered as part of that was a 12-week free trial at our leisure centres, again, to try and embed those alongside volunteering opportunities, social connection and employment and skills training, to try and embed that and bring that to life. So I'm conscious there's only so much we can capture in the slide, and I'm more than happy to talk at more length about that, Councillor Martin, but hopefully it gives you a feel for actually that influence and that ambition is being heard, and we're practically sort of working up solutions in the areas in response to that.
Yeah, just to come back on that, and you've reassured me to some extent on what you've just said. But what it sounds like is that the policy that's coming tomorrow is inherently linked to this place strategy, but it isn't the place strategy, and that's my concern. A lot of this is talking about what we can do to enable and influence, not what we can do. But what you're talking about is what we're doing. So there's that disconnect between, okay, is our direction that we're influencing and enabling, or are we doing? Now, I think we need to do more doing to try and bring those partners along. So what you're doing, I think, is the right thing to be doing when it comes to the embedded health pathway journey. I think that's the right thing to be doing, and that's what I was trying to say, that can we do stuff to bring people in? Can we do stuff to help influence them later down the line? But that's health. But what about the other ones? What are we doing to try and get people to help influence them later on down the line it's not going to be a tomorrow job. It's a 20, 30-year plan that you're talking about. But we need to decide sooner rather than later when we're going to stop trying to influence, when we're going to do a bit of doing, to hopefully then come back to influence a bit later down the line. And transport is the other one. We know about the local initiative and the combined authority. They've got a plan, they're going to stick to it. But obviously going to have a new mayor potentially. We might have the same mayor in next year, in just 10 months' time. So doing this work now is going to be good when it comes to next May, because then we can go in on day one and say, this is what we want for Huntingdonshire, and we're influencing the policy making from day one. So we're hitting that one at the right time. But if we have the same mayor again, have we just done all that work for no reason? Where's that work going to lead to? What are we going to do to get the mayor around the table to influence later down the line? It's trying to work out, are we spending too much time on trying to enable an influence, when in reality, sometimes we've got to do a bit of doing to get them to that stage.
Chair. So spooky, it was like you were in the room today. It really was. So the answer is, it's a series of things happening in parallel. It's a series of layers. So there are things that we are doing now, as in today, tomorrow, next week, because we have a new administration nationally who's excited and wants to do stuff and wants to make announcements. And so there is already a pipeline of things that we're asking for. Alconbury Station, for example, that's really important to us. Bus services in our rural areas, so there are some things we're already doing now. There are some big ticket items like, as I say, Alconbury Station, the land's there. There's a commitment theoretically. We kind of need that to come forward, and ideally pretty quickly. So some of this is that pipeline that needs to be happening in parallel. Some of it is that bigger strategic work and that buy-in, but that pipeline needs to continue to grow all of the time. So the doing in terms of, are we creating a pipeline? Are we creating the practical things we want the funding for all of the time? And that's a layer that continues every single day. And every day there'll be something new that pops on the list where somebody kind of goes, okay, actually something's happened over here. We need to do something different again. So I can assure you that that's already happening. But this is about then working out where bits of it are part of play strategy now, play strategy in the future. Part of it is some of our other strategies and how they play in. It's working smart across all of those to make sure that when there is the right opportunity, we're in the room with the list, and the list is well known. So that's what we're busy working on. But we're not going to wait a year for that. We are literally doing that now. And I think some of that work might have started about a week ago, because we knew there was going to be a new administration. We just didn't know what sort of administration. But every new administration always wants to do things, and pretty quickly, and that's already there, ready. Officers have stuff ready to go. It's all the things that you know about. No surprises.
Okay, Councillor Howell.
Mine's just a really quick question on the health on the health embedded steering group. Are there integrated neighbourhood board leads involved? Just wanted to. That's okay.
Councillor God.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to health embedded and active travel, now, if you're in a rural area, we have got the Ting bus service. Now, all I get, all Councillor Corley gets, and all Councillor Gray gets is complaints, because it is not working. As a consequence, residents of mine and the other councils I've mentioned cannot get into Huntingdon. They can't go to the health centres. They can't go to the leisure centres. They can't get in to go to work. Children can't get in to go to college. So it is an absolute nightmare. What is the district council doing to try and force the mayor to improve a terribly bad system that is now not getting people to use it because they cannot rely on it? They can't get on it. When they go to book it, they can't book it. They can't book it to get back. So you might be able to get into Huntingdon, but you can't get back. What's the point? Or if these are all the fundamental day-to-day issues that if you live in a rural area with no or very little bus service, They offered us a demand transport service, but it doesn't work. So we need, as an authority, to get that working with the mayor so that then our residents can then get to all the services, because they can't, unless they've got a car, they can't get to services across the district. And it is a serious problem, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere, and the mayor does not seem capable of being able to fix the problem, which I find extremely annoying, particularly when I have spent days taking the bus round the villages, explaining to people how to use the service, and then the service falls flat and they can't use it, which I think is a disgrace.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Gardner. I absolutely sort of note, the frustration, and I for one have had, not for a while, but a huge number of escalations and probably weekly calls with Councillor Gray and others about issues that have been raised with me previously. What I can say is those concerns have been sort of passed on and raised in the strongest possible terms. With the combined authority, and attempts have been made to improve that. I can take that away, and I haven't been as close to it, recently as I have over recent times, but more than happy to reach into that. What I would like to talk about is just a couple of other things that we've done as well. So one is we worked really hard with the combined authority around the sharing of data. So there are a range of Department for Transport metrics, basically, that define where buses should go. And in broad terms, the key metric that is used to define where buses go is to maximise the number of people within 400 metres of a bus stop. Now, on the face of it, that sounds like quite a good thing. And actually, when you look at figures like that, we've got about 91% plus of our population within 400 metres of a bus stop. But the perverse incentive that drives is buses that go on sort of snail shell type routes, trying to get as close to as many population centres as they possibly can, stopping at multiple stops to increase the percentage of people who are within 400 metres of a bus stop, rather than providing functional routes from people to places they want to go as fast as they possibly can. So the data that we fed in, Councillor Gardner, and I was personally involved in this, is data mapping areas of vulnerability, areas of people who need access to services, asking the questions and pushing hard on. I'm less interested in how close it goes to a household, but how close does it get to go to a place of employment? How close does it get to a GP practice, and mapping some of those things? So all of those have been fed in. And I know for a fact the combined authority under Neil Byers and others were actively pursuing that as an area. The final thing, and I think Councillor Comboy wants to come in, what I can say is front and centre in those conversations with the Deputy Chief Executive at NWAFT about the future shape of Hinchingbrooke Hospital has been the points raised about the transport interchange and the essential requirement that it is well integrated into a rural area, recognising we have elderly people often living alone in often disconnected communities, and how do they access that service? And that has been heard, both in terms of transport planning, but also considerations around housing and support and other factors too. So it very much is front and centre.
Can I just come back very quickly? Very quickly. I welcome what you've said. I will forward you some emails an email that Councillor Corley and I got last week, which outlines all the issues with regard to the Ting service. Now, when it was operated by Stagecoach, everybody thought the service was excellent. It was helping to get disabled people into Huntingdon, giving them a sense of future and everything else. But since we've changed operator, the whole thing has gone downhill. So that's my main. Oh,
Come on.
Well spotted.
It was a quick statement, Chair. Do you think it would be feasible for us maybe to ask someone to come along from the joint administration, whatever they're called, I've forgotten. Thank you. To maybe explain and hear directly from some of us who've had these experiences, but maybe they could explain to us what actions they are taking, because it's all very well hearing from you, Ollie, and I appreciate what you do bring us, but maybe getting one of them to on the carpet might be useful.
Through yourself, Chair, I think that's a very good point from Councillor Corley. It's something that can be looked at through the work programme for scrutiny. I think we just need to refine the topic and have that discussion as members through the Chair, and before we make that request to the Combined Authority, to make sure A, they send the right people, and B, that they're kind of pre-briefed and up to speed on what we're likely to ask or want to challenge. So yeah, I think it's a very good request that can be taken forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Martin, last question, yes? Excellent, thank you.
Last question. No, thank you very much, Chair. So receiving this, I read through the place strategy again just to refresh my memory. And one thing that I did see in there, that there was a very limited amount in there to do with farming. Now, obviously, Huntingdonshire is a huge farming area, and a lot of the different pathways are to do with buying locally, eating locally, good health, all of this, but there's still a very limited amount of farming within the place strategy itself. So I wonder if you can go away and maybe, if we have a refresh, we can see more farming, because I know that the farming community, especially in my area of Saltry, are facing a lot of issues when it comes to flooding, water retention, and that's having a huge impact on what they're able to produce and yields, and that's going to influence everything that's in this core document. So if we have a refresh or a jig about or some changes around, can we try and build in some more farming, which, as I said, is a key part of Huntingdonshire?
So this is where, again, those layers are really interesting. So the Combined Authority has been doing a similar process to our place strategy. It's going to create a shared ambition document. They've been doing that since January. The last stakeholders workshop was Monday, because I was in Ely on Monday. Farming has been very well represented in those forums. So, and that's all of the areas, including ours. One of the things that's come through loud and clear is around managing to really capitalise on agri-tech. In other words, how do we really celebrate the farming we've got and help farmers do more of the things that they want to do and we know that they're going to need to do, because food sustainability is really important and innovation is really important for that sector. And importantly, we were also talking about some parts of our area have far too much water, some don't have enough. And we have this irony that actually we're pumping a lot of water from our part of the country back out into the sea, when really could we and should we be doing something with it more locally? On the other hand, we've got Old Cumbria with slightly too much water. So there is something around innovation as well around our natural resources, and that includes then linking it back to agri-tech. So it's again this innovation. So that's actually coming through at the Combined Authority level, which is really important. But I take your point, and one of the challenges I think we had when we were developing the strategy was actually we probably didn't hear some of those voices as loudly, but actually it's really crucial. We now, as of yesterday, I've seen the data, again, data set, a bit like the data warehouse we shared with you just before we came into this meeting, that the Combined Authority has been generating. That's going to be shared, I think, at the Combined Authority meeting this month, in other words, shortly. When that goes live, that will give you, again, access to quite a lot of data specifically around Huntingdonshire. So it also will be really helpful because it's the evidence base around what farming have we got where, what sort of needs, and then about the aspiration for that sector for the future. So yes, and at some point, I suspect we might like to convene a particular group of interested individuals, and if you've got contacts that we ought to be talking to, I think the answer is we'd bite your hand off. We would love to have an opportunity to talk to a group of people who are agriculturally based, not necessarily just farmers, because there will be others in related industries, but we'd really like that conversation.
Thank you. I think we've had a fairly wide-ranging discussion on the subject. Can we move on to item 7, productivity plans? Oliver, thank you for being so patient.
It's felt like a lot has changed in a week, hasn't it? We've got a Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government back again, and I think it'll be interesting to see how this impacts on the item we've got here today. But just to give some background to members around what we have in front of us today. Back in March, as the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, presented the budget, What he asked alongside was he made a request of all public sector institutions to come back and produce a productivity plan to show how we intended to use the funding well and to demonstrate continued productivity in terms of both efficiency and effectiveness in terms of driving organisations forward. As the report lays out, we then got a formal request from the Under Minister in April that laid out what we were expected to respond to. 4 questions were posed to us and a request that we respond in 3 to 4 pages outlining how we met the terms of the productivity plan. Now, before I sort of get into some of the detail, one of the key points that was made, and I think the previous debate, I think, is a really good sort of setup for this, was around not just how organisations are productive internally, but how they work in partnership with other public sector organisations to drive productivity more globally. And actually, some of the conversations we've had today around transport, about working with health, around economic success, around how we use data, and you've seen the contextual measures stuff earlier today at 6 o'clock, I think are all evidence of actually some of the things that we are just doing anyway. So we've got the productivity plan in front of you, the 4 questions in our response. One of the things that we were asked to lay out was the metrics that we'd use to track that. So we're seeking feedback today. We will meet the expectation of publishing this on our website and keeping update in response to how we're doing against it before submitting it to the government on the 19th of July, and that being an enduring kind of commitment from us. So that's the productivity plan in and of itself. What rides alongside this is something called the Continuous Improvement Plan. And I think the key message that I'd want to get across here is I came and sat in front of you back in January and talked about the Office for Local Government and about how we were looking to meet reporting against those metrics. As you'll be well aware, we've refreshed our performance frameworks recently, we've refreshed our service planning frameworks, our project management frameworks, and really what our Continuous Improvement Plan does is it summarises all the things we're doing to continuously be as good as we possibly can be, and that predated the request for the productivity plan. So I think one of the key things is this is not something that we're doing because the government have asked us to do it. We are relentless in our desire to be as efficient as we possibly can be with the money that is hard earned by the people of Huntingdonshire to deliver the best possible services we can back. The Continuous Improvement Plan goes into a bit more detail than the government has asked us to in terms of what we're doing and the steps we've taken to embed that efficiency and effectiveness across the organisation as a whole. But we thought it was a useful companion piece to the specific requests around the productivity plan, and both documents are offered for sort of feedback and comment from all of you today, and I'm more than happy to take any questions on any of the specifics.
Thank you, Oliver. I actually liked it. I liked the layout, and I thought it was fairly easy to understand. However, I'll open it to the floor. Are there any questions? Councillor Morton.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for the report. Obviously, I completely understand you saying that this was asked of us by government, but it's something that we should be doing anyway. So it's good that we've taken this one in our stride and just got on with it. And broadly speaking, happy with the content of it. I think it's fairly well thought through. We cover a very wide range of bases when it comes across the whole organisation. The one thing that I would mention, obviously, with productivity, is then also looking at quality. It's good if we can produce more. More input, sure, great. Our productivity goes up. But if the quality of that output is then dropping significantly, then we're in a bad place. I've got a manufacturing company that I know that I could produce 10,000 bottles per day, but I know that those 10,000 bottles won't be of high quality if I did 5,000. And so that leads on to something from my professional experience within my business, or one of my businesses, is do we stick to ISO ratings? Do we take part in 18091, which then leads to 9001, 2019? Are we doing that? Because I have seen from doing it myself in my business that by going through the quality control systems, by getting the ISOs, literally overnight, your productivity improves, but so does your quality at the same time. So it's a win-win. So I don't know if anyone's able to answer that one.
So I'm pleased to report that Operations Services, which is one of my direct reports, is fully ISO 9001 accredited. So for exactly all the reasons that you describe. And I think what you'll appreciate equally is there is quite an overhead with maintaining some of these standards. That's always a balance. I'm a big fan of well-documented processes, but there is a balance in terms of the reporting and kind of oversight aspect. But yeah, operations is fully ISO 9001 accredited. We also have a range of other accreditations. So CCTV meets its full accreditation. Forgive me, I can't remember the specifics of the actual accreditation standard. But again, some of this is about efficiency, but some of it is about demonstrating both to our residents, but also where we're competing with commercial companies for contracts, that we offer services at a standard. We've just in One Leisure introduced sort of benchmarking against the CIMSPA standard, which is the relevance of Chartered Institute of Sport and Physical Activity Management, I think, or something like that. So yeah, yes, we do. Not everywhere. And as we've talked about when I came here and talked about the off-log measures, elsewhere we'll use benchmarking standards against near neighbours. We'll use the LG Inform kind of standard and benchmarking, and there'll be a range of others. But be assured that, where it makes sense to do so, we will very actively pursue those standards.
I think through yourself, Chair, just to supplement what Ollie said, you'll have seen the corporate peer review that we've had recently as well. We've got one lined up for planning to look at being done as well. So again, it's about using all of those differing levers and differing approaches to making sure that we're not only doing things quicker and smarter, but actually are we still providing good quality services at the end of it? And it's about embedding that as a cultural element, and hence why the continuous improvement plan is exactly that. This isn't something you do and then you stop. It's about continuing to do that day in, day out to make sure it's embedded as part of the culture of the organisation.
It's good to know. Councillor Blackwell. Oi, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for obviously your delivery and for the production of the report, which it is a good read. My concern was that I don't see any numeric targets in there, and particularly the section 3, ways to reduce wasteful spend. I thought that gave itself a great opportunity to set yourselves some targets. I mean, private business, that's what I'm sure that they would include. And so there's a lot of words, which is great, but for the constituents looking at this on our website, I would have thought they would have been looking for some actual targets, performance measures, and the actual goals for the council to achieve. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Blackwell. So what as I said in introduction, what we have in each of these areas is a metric or KPI that will be judged against. So you're absolutely right. This goes way beyond aspiration. So ultimately we'll be judged on the delivery in these areas, and the bit about the identification of what the metrics or KPIs we'll be using is about being able to demonstrate that exact progress over time and how we're doing in those areas. So we'll be openly transparent in relation to that. What we didn't want to do with this, and again, I'll take the feedback, is a number of these areas already have targets embedded in our core way of working. So, our key performance metrics are brought back to scrutiny every year for the setting of targets against objectives. And what we didn't want to do was create another document sat off to one side that replicated our core way of working in every way. So please be assured that even though the targets aren't listed here, those targets are normally nested into our key kind of performance framework, our performance plan, and in terms of the quarterly reporting, reported against. So you will see the progress over time, but it's probably captured elsewhere. And bluntly, some of it is about trying to get, is the limited space, is trying to squeeze as much as we can into that 3 to 4 pages. And as you can see, we've played with some of the margins just to get in what we've got already. But so please be assured that those targets and delivery against them are absolutely core to what we're trying to do here.
Oliver. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a brief one, just to highlight that quite a number of the links in the document go to internal council, like intranet and Power BI, so if it's going to be published, then those will need to be addressed.
Councillor Morton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Following on from the last point is, how are we, or how are you and us as a collective and senior leadership going to embed this productivity within our offices, within our staff, and make sure that all of our teams aren't working in silos and that best practice is passed across the organisation? I know from experience with talking to officers that there's one department that I know really well that is very efficient, and within the team they work very closely with their senior leadership team or with their managers to make sure that they can make those small improvements. Then those small improvements aren't then passed on further onto the chain, going into different departments. So how are we making sure at a senior leadership team level this is being prioritised, and that employees and teams feel that they can come out of their silo at times, come to you guys and try and improve across the whole council and not just in those small silos?
It's a really excellent question, Councillor Martin. And as you'll appreciate, in big, diverse, complex organisations, that is a challenge that many organisations, and my time in the private sector, battles with too. I think there are two sort of probably key responses. So back to the conversation about metrics and how we track targets. What you'll know through our corporate plan is what we have in each area is an objective, something we're trying to achieve, then a set of operational performance metrics, so how quickly we're deciding planning applications or how quickly we're dealing with revs and bends claims, and then some targeted work around any projects that relate to the achievement of that. So we've heard about Market Town's programme today, for instance. How's that contributing against that outcome? And then finally, and again, the play strategy would be a good example, any strategic engagement that we're doing in that sort of slightly longer term arena where we're trying to change things. So one is we do have that slice across the organisation, linking all those aspects together. And the way we report that is to make sure that across the organisation, people get to see what's working in one area, how could that be applied in another. So I think that's one aspect of it. I think the second part is when you get into the continuous improvement plan, and we've listed out the actions that are already committed in service plans and the corporate plan to deliver some of those things. Largely, as with a lot of change things, it comes down to three key areas. What are we doing in terms of our people? What are we doing in terms of process? And then what are we doing in terms of technology? Now, one of the big things in that people area is the development of our workforce strategy. And some of that is about making sure that both we're able to recruit people and, we've got a pipeline of the talent that we need, but also that those staff have the skills and capabilities we need moving forward. So again, only yesterday we were sitting down just finalising what the training and development plans were going to be for staff in the team and how the induction processes would work, to make sure, for instance, that things like performance management, HR, finance, project management are well embedded in the services, but simply that best practice from one area to another is fully embedded too. So, again, tomorrow at Scrutiny, we're bringing sort of the closed down report on garden subscription, how the initial phase of the go live of that has happened. And that process of lessons learned and embedding those across the organisation is pretty well established. Could we be better? We can always be better. But I think the workforce strategy is a key piece. And then as we get into the process and technology aspects of that change as well, again, they will feed into that training and support for staff as we move forward as well. So I think watch the space on workforce strategy in particular about the sort of transfer and upskilling of staff to make sure we're taking the best practice out of these areas.
That's good to know. Councillor Well.
Thank you, Chair. Just to explore Ray's question at this point, I think it's worth just having another look at, I would suggest. Looking at the South Cambridgeshire multi-year study of their 4-day week trial and noticing the positive benefits from that, so the 39% reduction in staff turnover with a saving of costs of 370k, planning applications actually, throughput of those actually improving, and major decisions coming within the correct timescale. So I know that that's been looked at previously, and obviously we haven't taken it any further. I just wondered, in light of that multi-year study completion and the change in government, whether it's actually worth taking another look at the possibility. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wells. We relentlessly look, and I've mentioned local government inform, I've mentioned Offlog. We're continuously benchmarking against other organisations and looking at any opportunity to be more productive. I'm well aware of the kind of the controversy that surrounded the pilot, in South Cambridgeshire. And certainly it's not something that, we'd be making, any commitment to. And I realize there's a lot of concerns, but I think the key point I would make is best practice in any form that delivers results, I think would be something that we would look at and carefully consider.
Are there,
If I may, just to supplement Ollie's answer on that particular point, I think if you correlated the timing of when these requirements for productivity plans came about, I think that you'll find them as a plausible link between what the government were challenged with by South Cambs and others. And as Councillor Conboy said earlier, we're in a bit of a changing landscape, and there might be a different approach by this new government. And who knows, these productivity plans might be a one-year thing, they might be something longer. I think, however, what we've done here is a really good exercise in terms of helping to shape the culture and the future of the organisation. And actually, as a good organisation, we should be looking at these things irrespective of them being a government requirement or not.
I totally agree, actually, on that one. Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you'd forgotten me again. A couple of brief observations and a question. Just at 1.3, we talk about, it says a programme has been scoped and resourced to review and improve the strategic approach to managing and preventing customer contact. I'm sure we don't mean preventing customer contact. Perhaps we need to look at the language before we put this on the website. And there was another one, sorry. At 3, and I'll ask my question because I'm intrigued. At 3, ways to reduce wasteful spend within systems, including specific consideration of expenditure on consultants and discredited staff. What are discredited staff, and are they people that we really ought to be talking about in a public document? That's the title of 3. Again, just, I'm not sure what it means. Maybe it's AI, which is my next question.
Thank you. I think it's a typo. Yeah, but thank you for pointing it out. I think what it's driving at here is basically non-PAYE, non-full-time. So I think the word might be contracted rather than discredited. I think there. So thank you. In relation to your point on customer, what we're not trying to do is prevent customer contact. In that, basically, in the mind of removing phone numbers or anything else. What we are trying to do is prevent customer contact by removing the need for them to contact us in the first place. So, quite, but just for the avoidance of doubt, that's what we're trying to do. If we do not miss your bin, you do not need to call us. Therefore, that's prevention.
Oh, very good. Oh, you've got a question as well.
There we go. My question relates to 2.2 around AI. I was intrigued, and I just wondered if you could give us a bit more information. So we're making use of the Copilot AI licenses in the authority. I just would love to understand what that means and what it is we're actually doing there, because it sounds quite exciting.
So we have 20 plus licenses for Copilot across the organisation. I have one of those. I'm also part, for instance, of the local government digital committee. So we're actively engaged in government channels around the use of AI and what we can do in these kind of areas. And honestly, what we're trying to do is identify a range of opportunities where this can maximise how we our efficiency and how we move forward. Some of the early areas we're piloting, which I think is what you're driving at, is things like note taking. So actually, the amount of time when you've been in a project meeting, for instance, and there'll be someone sat there recording the meeting, watching it back, pulling the notes out of it, of actually piloting the use of Copilot to take those notes, automatically produce the action points and a quick review of those to see how that works. That's a relatively low risk scenario, particularly for those officers like myself who are used to taking their own action points as they go anyway. But subject to the success of that, I think there is the opportunity for that to go further, into noting correspondence, potentially meetings with the public. And I think Becky's looking nervously in one corner. Potentially what that knocks onto formal meetings too. So they would be examples, but going beyond that, there are some really good use cases out there about how people are using AI, predictive, not predictive, but looking at risk profiling in terms of applications and so on, of actually putting things into the easy category of actually, is there a great deal of value in an officer spending time on this on the basis of what we're seeing? This seems a sensible approval in areas like that.
Are there any other questions? Thank you. We can move on to the final agenda item. So it's peer challenge update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So item 8 on your agenda should have been the peer review. So I come here with an apology on behalf of Michelle Sachs as the Chief Exec. Cards on the table, we haven't received the final report yet, so therefore we haven't been able to put it to you. Members that have been through the peer challenge process will understand that the way this works is we will receive the formal report. We have to formally accept it as a council, so it was to come here tonight to give you early oversight of it, then going to Cabinet and then on to full council. Unfortunately, therefore, it's not been possible to share the report in advance, so it will come to you. You will see it as part of the full council papers. As I say that, there is no ability for the council to amend the report once we've got it from the peers. It's their views and they give them to us. That said, we do intend to respond to it and develop an action plan, and we need to get in order to get into that space, we need to formally receive the report before the summer recess. So we are champing at the bit with LGA colleagues to get that report so that we can meet the forthcoming full council. In that context, there will be plenty of opportunity for scrutiny and members as a whole to reflect on the report, comment on the document, help us shape and develop the action plan that comes through, and then further monitor the ongoing delivery against that action plan in advance of the peers coming back to do their follow-up report. So unfortunately, I can't give you any more than that this evening, other than to say please take it with our apologies that we can't share anything with you in advance of full council.
Thank you for the update, Mike. It's very helpful, and I'm sure that we all look forward to it when it arrives. At that point, I think we've completed the agenda, and I want to thank everyone for their time and patience tonight with the gremlins and the technology, and thanks very much. Thanks, Bob. End meeting. Thank you.